Hey everyone. Before I tell you this story, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? Are you at home after a long shift? Maybe in your car during a lunch break? On the train commuting to your second job? Drop your location in the comments, because what I'm about to share hits different when you understand just how hard so many of us are working right now. And trust me, this story is about to make you question everything you think you know about trust and sacrifice. My name is Taylor Brooks, and 2 years ago, I thought I had my life figured out. I was 31, married to Derek for 6 years, living in a decent apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, working a solid corporate job in marketing that paid the bills. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We could afford groceries without calculating every item. We could go out to dinner occasionally. We could breathe. Then, inflation hit like a freight train. I'm not talking about the kind of inflation you read about in textbooks. I'm talking about watching the price of eggs jump from $2 to $6 seemingly overnight. I'm talking about filling up my gas tank and watching the numbers climb past 70, then 80, then $90. I'm talking about our grocery bill doubling, then tripling, while our paycheck stayed exactly the same. The first few months, Derek and I handled it the way most couples do. We cut back. No more eating out, no more impulse purchases. We started buying generic brands, shopping sales, using coupons. I'd stand in the grocery store with my phone calculator, adding up every item before I put it in my cart, making sure I stayed under budget. Some weeks, I'd have to put things back at the checkout when the total was higher than I'd calculated. "We'll get through this," Derek would say, putting his arm around me as we ate another dinner of rice and beans. "Everyone's struggling right now. It's not forever." I believed him. God, I believed him completely. But after 6 months, cutting back wasn't enough anymore. Our savings were draining faster than we could replenish them. The rents had gone up, the utilities had gone up, car insurance had gone up. Everything was more expensive, and we were drowning. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. "I'm going to get a second job," I told Derek one night after I'd spent an hour staring at our bank account, trying to figure out how we were going to make it through the month. He looked up from his phone, surprised. "A second job? Taylor, you're already working 45 hours a week. When would you even have time?" "I'll make time," I said, my voice steady even though my stomach was churning with anxiety. "We don't have a choice, Derek. We can't keep draining our savings like this. One of us needs to bring in more money, and my corporate job has more room for advancement than your sales position. If I can just get us through this rough patch, maybe in a year or two I'll get promoted and we can go back to normal." The math made sense. Derek's job in retail sales was commission-based and unpredictable, especially during an economic downturn when people weren't buying as much. My job was salaried, stable, but not enough. A second job would bridge the gap. It was logical, it was necessary, it was what couples did when times got hard. They sacrificed together. "If you're sure," Derek said, and I saw something in his expression that I couldn't quite read. Relief, maybe? Or was it guilt? Looking back now, I know exactly what it was, but in the moment, I just thought he was grateful. I found the second job within a week, a retail position at a big box store, evening and weekend shifts that wouldn't conflict with my corporate schedule. The pay wasn't great, $15 an hour, but it would add an extra $1,000 a month to our household income. That was enough to cover groceries and some of the increased utility costs. My new schedule looked like this: wake up at 5:30 a.m., get ready for my corporate job, work from 8 to 5 p.m., drive straight to my retail job, work from 6 to 11 p.m., get home around 11:30, eat something quick, fall into bed. Repeat. On weekends, I worked 10-hour shifts at the retail store. I had exactly 1 day off every 2 weeks, and I usually spent it doing laundry, cleaning the apartment, and meal prepping so I'd have something to eat during my 18-hour workdays. I was exhausted, bone deep, soul crushing exhausted. The kind of tired that makes your body ache and your brain feel fuzzy. I'd catch myself zoning out in meetings at my corporate job or nearly falling asleep standing during slow periods at the retail store. I started drinking so much coffee that my hands shook. I lost 15 pounds in 2 months because I barely had time to eat. But we were surviving. That's what I told myself every morning when the alarm went off and every muscle in my body screamed in protest. We were surviving. I was keeping us afloat. I was doing what needed to be done. Derek, to his credit, seemed appreciative. He'd have dinner waiting for me when I got home from my retail shift. Nothing fancy, just something simple he'd thrown together. He'd tell me I was amazing, that he didn't know how I did it, that he was so grateful for my sacrifice. "I don't deserve you," he'd say, kissing my forehead as I collapsed on the couch. "You're incredible, Taylor. We're going to get through this because of you." Those words kept me going, knowing that he recognized my sacrifice, that he appreciated what I was doing for us. It made the exhaustion bearable. We were a team. We were facing this crisis together. I was working myself to the bone, but it was for us, for our future, for our marriage. Kennedy, my best friend and coworker at the corporate job, tried to warn me. "Taylor, you look terrible," she said one day during lunch, studying my face with concern. "I'm not trying to be mean, but you've got dark circles under your eyes, you're losing weight, and you just fell asleep during the budget meeting. This isn't—" "It's temporary," I insisted, stirring my instant ramen, the cheap kind I'd started buying in bulk because it was all I could afford for my lunches now. "Just until we build our savings back up, maybe another 6 months." "And what's Derek doing?" Kennedy asked, her tone sharp. "Why isn't he getting a second job? Why is this all on you?" I bristled at the question. His job is unpredictable. If he took on evening work, he might miss commission opportunities during busy periods. It makes more sense for me to do it. Kennedy looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "If you say so. Just be careful, Taylor. Make sure you're not sacrificing yourself for someone who wouldn't do the same for you." I laughed it off. Kennedy didn't understand. She'd never been married, never had to make these kinds of compromises. She didn't know what it meant to be a team, to put your partnership above your own comfort. I wish I'd listened to her. 3 months into my two-job schedule, I noticed something odd. Despite the extra income I was bringing in, an additional $1,000 a month plus my regular salary, we never seemed to have more money in our account. I was working 80-hour weeks, but our financial situation hadn't improved at all. If anything, it felt like we had less than before. I brought it up to Derek one night, too exhausted to be tactful about it. "Where is all the money going?" I asked, staring at our bank statement on my phone. "I'm bringing in so much more now, but we're still barely scraping by. I don't understand." Derek glanced up from the TV, his expression neutral. "Inflation's getting worse, babe. Everything keeps going up. The extra money you're making is just helping us tread water. We're not drowning anymore, but we're not exactly swimming either." It made sense, I suppose. Prices were still climbing. Maybe the extra income was just offsetting the increased costs. Maybe I needed to work even harder, find a way to bring in even more money. So that's what I did. I started picking up extra shifts at the retail store whenever they were available. I volunteered for overtime at my corporate job. I said yes to every opportunity to make an extra dollar, even when my body begged me to rest. I worked through migraines. I worked through exhaustion so severe that I'd cry in my car during the 15-minute drive between jobs. I worked through the loneliness of barely seeing my husband anymore, of our entire relationship becoming a series of quick conversations in passing. But we were surviving. That's what mattered. We were surviving. Except we weren't. And I was about to discover exactly why. The first real crack in my carefully constructed denial came on a Tuesday evening, about 4 months into my double job marathon. I'd just finished a particularly brutal day, a crisis at my corporate job that had me running between meetings all morning, followed by a chaotic dinner rush at the retail store where we were understaffed and I'd been yelled at by 3 different customers. I was sitting in my car in our apartment complex parking lot, too exhausted to even walk the 50 feet to our door. My head was pounding, my feet were throbbing. I just needed 5 minutes of silence before I had to go inside and pretend I had any energy left for conversation. That's when I saw Derek's car pull into the lot. Nothing unusual about that. He got home from work around this time most days. But what caught my attention was that he wasn't alone. There was someone in the passenger seat. A woman. I watched as Derek parked, and the woman leaned over to hug him. It wasn't a quick, friendly hug. It was intimate, lingering, the kind of hug that made my stomach drop and my heart start racing. Then she got out of his car, and I got a good look at her for the first time. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with long dark hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than I made in a month. She was carrying shopping bags, multiple shopping bags from expensive stores, Nordstrom, Saks, stores I hadn't been able to shop at in years. Derek walked her to a car parked a few spaces away, a new Lexus with temporary tags. They talked for a few more minutes, standing close, and then she drove away. Derek stood there, watching her leave, a smile on his face that I hadn't seen him give me in months. My hands were shaking as I got out of my car and walked toward him. He didn't notice me until I was almost beside him, and when he did, his expression changed so quickly it was like watching a mask drop into place. "Taylor, hey babe, I didn't see you there." He moved to kiss me, but I stepped back. "Who was that?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. Who was who? He actually had the audacity to look confused. The woman, the one you just walked to her car, the one carrying shopping bags from stores we can't afford to shop at while I'm working 80 hours a week eating ramen for every meal. Derek's expression flickered. Annoyance, maybe, or calculation. "Oh, that's just Simone. She's a client. I gave her a ride because her car was in the shop." A client? A client from your retail job? A client who needs a ride home? "Yeah, we were discussing a large purchase. She's thinking about buying a whole bedroom set, like $8,000 worth of furniture. I wanted to make sure I gave her excellent customer service so I'd get the commission." The explanation was smooth, rehearsed almost, and it made enough sense that I wanted to believe it, because the alternative, that my husband was lying to me, that something was going on, was too painful to consider. "Why was she carrying shopping bags?" I asked. "I don't know, Taylor. She went shopping earlier, I guess. I'm not her keeper. Why are you interrogating me like this?" Now there was defensiveness in his voice, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I'm not interrogating you. We're supposedly so broke that I'm working 2 jobs and we can't afford groceries, but you're driving around clients who shop at Saks Fifth Avenue? It just seems weird." Derek ran his hair through his head, a gesture of frustration I knew well. "I'm trying to make a living here. I'm trying to earn commission so I can contribute more to our household. But I can't do my job if you're going to be suspicious of every woman I interact with. Do you not?" And there it was, the pivot that made me feel like I was the bad guy. I was the one being unreasonable. I was the one creating problems. "I trust you," I said quietly, even though something in my gut was screaming that I shouldn't. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." "I know you are," Derek said, and his voice softened. He reached out and pulled me into a hug, and I let him because I was too exhausted to keep my guard up. "You're working so hard, babe. I see you. I appreciate you. I just need you to trust me, okay? I'm out here trying to make things better for us too." I nodded against his chest, wanting desperately to believe him, because if I didn't believe him, then what was I working myself to death for? But that night, lying in bed, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion, I couldn't stop thinking about Simone, about her designer clothes and her new Lexus and the way Derek had smiled at her, about how he'd never mentioned this important client before, this woman who was supposedly about to give him an $8,000 commission. I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself that exhaustion was making me see things that weren't there, told myself to focus on what mattered, keeping us financially afloat. But the doubt had been planted, and once you start questioning things, it's hard to stop. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing other things, small things that individually meant nothing, but together painted a picture I didn't want to see. Derek's phone was always face down now. He'd take calls in the other room, saying they were work-related. He'd come home smelling like expensive perfume that he claimed was from helping female customers in the store. He'd stay late at work more often, saying he was closing deals. And the money situation never got better. No matter how many hours I worked, no matter how much extra I brought in, we were always just barely scraping by. Derek said it was inflation, and I believed him because I wanted to, because I needed to. Then I found the first receipt. I wasn't snooping, at least that's what I told myself. I was doing laundry, emptying Derek's pants pockets before throwing them in the wash, the way I'd done 1,000 times before. And there it was, crumpled up in his back pocket, a receipt from a steakhouse downtown, the kind of place we used to go for special occasions before inflation hit, the kind of place I hadn't been to in over a year because we couldn't afford it. The date on the receipt was from 2 nights ago, when Derek had said he was working late. The total was $187 for 2 people. My heart was pounding as I smoothed out the receipt, studying every detail. 2 ribeye steaks, a bottle of expensive wine, an appetizer to share, dessert. $187 on a single dinner while I was eating instant ramen at my desk during my 15-minute break between jobs. I stood there in our laundry room, holding that receipt, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't about trust anymore. This was about facts, numbers, evidence. Derek came home an hour later and found me sitting at the kitchen table, the receipt laid out in front of me. "Hey babe, I'm starving. Is there anything to eat?" He was halfway to the refrigerator before he noticed my expression, before he saw what I was holding. He froze. "What's this?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. That's from a client dinner. Remember I told you I was working late Tuesday?" "You said you were working late. You didn't say you were having a $187 dinner at the most expensive steakhouse in Charlotte." "It was a business expense, Taylor. I was entertaining a potential client. The company reimburses me for things like that." "Really? Because I've been married to you for 6 years, and you've never mentioned business dinners before, and you've certainly never been reimbursed for them, because if you had been, we'd have that money, which we don't." Derek's jaw tightened. "Why are you going through my pockets?" "I wasn't going through your pockets. I was doing laundry. Our laundry, Derek, which I do because I'm the only one who does anything in this house besides work myself to an early grave." "That's not fair. I work too." "Do you?" The question came out sharp, and I saw him flinch. "Because I'm working 80 hours a week, Derek. I'm working myself to an early grave to keep us fed and housed, and you're out having expensive dinners with clients and driving around women in designer clothes. So please, explain to me how exactly you're working." We stared at each other across the kitchen table, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Not guilt, not shame. anger. He was angry that I found out, not sorry that he'd done it, angry that he'd been caught. "I can't do this right now," he said, grabbing his keys off the counter. "Taylor?" But he was already gone, the apartment door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the walls. I sat there alone at the kitchen table, staring at that receipt, and felt my entire world tilting on its axis. Because deep down, I already knew. I knew that this wasn't about one dinner. This was about a pattern, a lie, maybe multiple lies. The question wasn't whether Derek was betraying me. The question was, how long had it been going on, and how much had he taken from me? I picked up my phone and called Kennedy. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "I think Derek's cheating on me, and I think he's been stealing my money to pay for it." There was a pause, and then Kennedy's voice, steady and sure. "I'm on my way over. Don't do anything until I get here. And Taylor, I'm sorry, but I'm not surprised." That was the moment I knew my life was about to change forever. Kennedy arrived 45 minutes later with her laptop, a bottle of wine, and a determined expression that made me feel like I had an ally for the first time in months. She also brought Brianna, who worked as a forensic accountant and helped Kennedy track down financial irregularities at our company the previous year. "Okay," Brianna said, setting up her laptop on our kitchen table. "Let's start with the basics. Do you have access to all your joint accounts?" I pulled up our joint account on my phone, my hands shaking slightly. "We have one joint checking account where both our paychecks get deposited and all our bills get paid from. That's it. We don't have credit cards. Derek said we should avoid debt during the inflation." Brianna and Kennedy exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. "That's interesting," Brianna said carefully, "because avoiding credit cards during inflation is actually financially irresponsible if you pay them off monthly. You lose purchase protection and cashback rewards. Plus, someone who's actually worried about money would want a credit card for emergencies. Unless," Kennedy added, her voice tight with anger, "someone doesn't want you seeing what they're spending money on." I felt sick. "You think he has credit cards I don't know about?" "Let's find out," Brianna said, already typing. "What's Derek's social security number?" Over the next 2 hours, Brianna walked me through a process I never knew existed. She pulled Derek's credit report, legally since we were married and shared finances. What we found made me want to throw up. Derek had 4 credit cards. 4. All opened within the last 18 months. All with balances that totaled just over $43,000. "Oh my God," I whispered, staring at the screen. $43,000. How did I not know about this? "The bills probably go to his email," Brianna explained, her voice gentle despite the bomb she'd just dropped. "And he's probably been making minimum payments from your joint account, small enough that you wouldn't notice among all your other automatic payments." I pulled up our bank statements, scrolling through months of transactions. She was right. There were payments labeled CC payment that I'd never questioned, ranging from $50 to $200 each month. I'd assumed they were utilities or subscriptions. Instead, they were minimum payments on secret credit cards. "But $43,000, I said, my voice cracking. "What could he possibly have spent that much money on?" "Let's find out," Kennedy said, her expression grim. "Can you log into his email?" I could. Derek and I had always shared passwords, or at least I thought we had. I pulled up his email on my phone, and we started searching for credit card statements. What we found over the next hour made me understand exactly what my 80-hour work weeks had been funding. Nordstrom, multiple charges over $500, sometimes multiple times per week. Designer clothes, shoes, handbags. Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, dozens of charges ranging from $150 to $300, always for 2 people, always on nights when Derek had told me he was working late. Hilton hotels, weekend stays at luxury properties in Charlotte and nearby cities, rooms with king beds and spa packages. Tiffany & Co., 3 charges totaling $4,200, jewelry I'd never seen. Lexus Financial, a car payment, $680 per month for a vehicle I'd never ridden in. "That's Simone's car," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant and strange. "He bought her a car." Kennedy grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. "Taylor, I'm so sorry." But I was beyond sorry. I was doing math in my head. $43,000 in debt, plus whatever he'd been spending from our joint account. Money that came from my 80-hour work weeks. Money that I'd earned by skipping meals and working myself sick and crying in my car from exhaustion. He'd been taking my sacrifice and spending it on another woman's luxury lifestyle. I'd been eating ramen while he bought her steaks. I'd been wearing the same worn-out shoes for 2 years while he bought her designer heels. I'd been working myself into the ground while he took her on weekend getaways. "I need to see more," I said, my voice hard. "I need to know everything." We spent the next 3 hours going through every statement, every receipt, every transaction we could find. Brianna showed me how to access deleted emails from his trash folder, where we found even more evidence: love messages to Simone, plans for trips, discussions about her apartment lease, which he was apparently paying for, apologies for not being able to see her more often because the wife is working all the time now. The wife, that's what he called me. Not Taylor, not my wife, just the wife, like I was an obligation, an inconvenience. "He's been seeing her for at least 18 months, Brianna said, showing me the earliest transactions she could find. Based on the spending pattern, it looks like it started right around the time inflation began getting really bad. The timing made me want to scream. He'd started his affair right when our financial crisis began, right when I was panicking about how we'd survive, right when I was losing sleep over grocery bills. While I was lying awake at night worrying about our future, he was starting a relationship with another woman. While I was cutting back on everything, he was spending freely. While I was sacrificing everything, he was indulging. "There's more," Kennedy said quietly, looking at something on her phone. "Taylor," she said, "you need to see this." She turned her phone toward me, and I found myself looking at Simone's Instagram profile. It was public, full of photos documenting a lifestyle that looked nothing like the struggling, inflation-stricken existence Derek had claimed we were living. Photos at expensive restaurants with captions like, "My man really knows how to treat me right." Photos of designer shopping bags with "spoiled by the best." Photos of weekend getaway locations with heart emojis and tags for Derek's social media account. My husband's account, public where anyone could see. "He hasn't even tried to hide it," I whispered. "He's been posting about her publicly while telling me we're too broke to buy groceries." I scrolled through her profile, each photo like a knife to my gut. There were pictures of jewelry I recognized from the Tiffany charges, pictures of the Lexus with "new car day, thank you, baby," pictures of them at places I'd never been, her wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery. And then I found the photo that broke me completely. It was from 3 months ago, right around the time I'd started picking up extra shifts at both jobs because Derek had said we were falling behind on bills. In the photo, Simone was standing on a beach at sunset, wearing a new bikini, her arms outstretched, with a caption that read, "Best surprise ever, Miami with my love, blessed, spoiled, living my best life." Derek and I hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. We'd canceled our anniversary trip because we couldn't afford it. We'd stayed home every weekend because we were too broke to do anything. But he'd taken her to Miami. While I was working a double shift at the retail store, he was on a beach with his mistress, spending money I'd earned by sacrificing everything. I stood up so fast the chair fell backward, hitting the floor with a crash that made both Kennedy and Brianna jump. I walked to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before I threw up. Everything I'd eaten that day, which wasn't much, came back up as my body finally revolted against the betrayal it had been absorbing for the past several hours. Kennedy was there, pulling my hair back, rubbing my back while I sobbed and retched. "Let it out," she said softly. "Let it all out." When I was finally empty, I sat on the bathroom floor, my back against the wall, my whole body shaking. What do I do? I asked, looking up at Kennedy with tears streaming down my face. What the hell do I do now? Now, Kennedy said, her voice fierce. Now you stop sacrificing for a man who's been exploiting you. Now you stop working yourself to death to fund his affair. Now you take back control of your life and make him face consequences for what he's done. But how? The money's gone. The debt is in his name, but we're married, so legally I might be responsible for half of it. I've destroyed my health working these jobs, and it was all for nothing. He's taken everything from me. Brianna appeared in the doorway. Not everything, she said. He's taken your money and your trust, but you still have something he doesn't. What? I asked bitterly. What could I possibly have? Evidence, she said, holding up her laptop. Every transaction, every email, every receipt, every text message. I've been documenting everything we found tonight, taking screenshots, saving everything to a secure cloud. And tomorrow, you're going to take all of this evidence to the best divorce lawyer in Charlotte, and you're going to make damn sure he doesn't get away with this. I looked between Kennedy and Brianna, these two women who'd spent their evening helping me uncover the worst betrayal of my life, and felt something spark inside me. Not quite hope, not yet, but something like determination. Derek had exploited my sacrifice. He took my love, my work, my exhaustion, and turned it into a luxury lifestyle for another woman. He lied to my face every single day while I worked myself sick to keep us afloat. But he'd also underestimated me. He assumed I'd never find out. He assumed I'd keep working, keep sacrificing, keep believing his lies about inflation and struggling to survive. He was wrong. Okay, I said, wiping my eyes and standing up. Okay, let's do this. Let's make sure he faces every single consequence he deserves. Kennedy smiled, fierce and proud. That's my girl. It was after midnight when Kennedy and Brianna finally left, but I couldn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with Derek's laptop. I knew his password because he'd given it to me years ago when we had nothing to hide from each other, and I continued my investigation. I found the lease agreement for Simone's apartment, $2,800 per month for a luxury 2-bedroom in South Park, one of Charlotte's most expensive neighborhoods. The lease was in her name, but the rent payments came from one of Derek's secret credit cards. I found car insurance documents for the Lexus, registered in Simone's name, but paid by Derek. I found receipts for a $3,500 spa day package, tickets to sold-out concerts, charges for DoorDash and Uber Eats that added up to hundreds of dollars per month. Every discovery made me angrier. Every charge was money I'd earned. Every luxury was built on my sacrifice. Every lie had been told to my face while I worked myself sick to keep us afloat. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. I was done being the wife who worked herself to death. I was done being the fool who believed her husband's lies. I was done sacrificing for a man who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck to fund his double life. Derek came home around 7 in the morning, probably expecting to find me already gone to my corporate job. Instead, he found me sitting at the kitchen table with Derek's laptop open in front of me, every piece of evidence laid out in neat stacks. The look on his face when he saw what I'd found was almost worth all the pain. Almost. Derek stood frozen in the doorway, his keys still in his hand, staring at the evidence spread across our kitchen table like a crime scene reconstruction. And in a way, that's exactly what it was, the documentation of 18 months of financial and emotional crimes against our marriage. "Taylor," he started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the fact that I hadn't slept all night. Don't say my name like we're about to have a normal conversation. Don't say it like you haven't been lying to me every single day for the past year and a half while I worked myself 80 hours a week to keep us from losing everything. He set his keys down slowly, carefully, like he was dealing with a wild animal that might attack. Good, he should be scared. "Where have you been all night?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd tracked his phone location before he came home. He'd been at Simone's apartment, the apartment I'm paying for. "I stayed at a friend's house. I needed time to think after our fight." "Don't lie to me anymore, Derek." I turned his laptop around so he could see the screen. A map showing his phone location history, a little blue dot sitting at the South Park address I'd memorized from the lease agreement. "You were at her apartment, Simone's apartment, the apartment you're paying $2,800 per month while I eat ramen and skip meals to save." His face went pale. "You went through my phone? You tracked me?" "I went through everything," I said, gesturing to the stacks of paper. "Credit card statements, bank records, emails, text messages, hotel reservations, jewelry purchases, car payments. Every single lie you've told me for the past 18 months is documented right here." Derek's expression changed as he processed what I was saying. The fear shifted to something else, calculation. I could practically see him trying to figure out how much trouble he was in, what excuses might work, what he could say to minimize the damage. "Taylor, I can explain." "Explain?" I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "You're going to explain how you've spent $43,000 on another woman while I've been working myself sick? You're going to explain how you bought her a Lexus while I've been driving a car with 200,000 miles that I'm terrified is going to break down every time I start it? You're going to explain Miami." He flinched at the mention of Miami. "You told me we couldn't afford to fix the air conditioning in our apartment during the hottest summer on record. You told me we needed to keep the thermostat at 82 degrees to save money on electricity. I was passing out from heat exhaustion between my 2 jobs, and you were on a beach in Miami with your mistress?" "She's not my mistress," Derek said, and the audacity of that statement made me want to throw something at him. "Oh, I'm sorry. What would you call a woman you've been sleeping with, buying expensive gifts for, taking on vacations, and supporting financially while you're married to someone else?" "It's complicated, Taylor." "No, Derek, it's actually very simple. You're a cheater and a liar who's been stealing my money to fund an affair. That's not complicated. That's just evil." "I haven't been stealing your money," he said, and now there was defensiveness in his voice, like I was the one being unreasonable. "We're married. It's our money. I have just as much right to spend it as you do." The sheer entitlement of that statement left me speechless for a moment. He actually believed that. He actually thought he had a right to spend money I'd earned while lying about where it was going. "You're right," I said, finally, my voice deadly calm. "We are married, which means you committed fraud against me. You opened credit cards without my knowledge. You made financial decisions that affected both of us without my consent. You lied to me about our financial situation to manipulate me into working more hours while you spent the money on another woman. Do you know what that's called, Derek? Financial abuse." He recoiled like I'd slapped him. I didn't abuse you, Taylor. Don't be dramatic." "I had you working 80 hours a week," I said, standing up, my hands flat on the table. "I had you so exhausted I could barely function. I had you skipping meals and wearing worn-out shoes and crying from exhaustion. I had you believing we were struggling to survive, that my sacrifice was the only thing keeping us from losing everything. And the whole time, you were living a luxury lifestyle with another woman using money I earned. If that's not abuse, what the hell is it?" "It wasn't like that, Derek," he said, running his hair through his gesture I used to find endearing and now just found pathetic. "It started out innocent. I met Simone at work and we just clicked. It wasn't planned. And yeah, maybe I spent some money on her, but you have to understand, you were always working. You were never home. I was lonely. I was working, I shouted, finally losing the control I'd been maintaining. I was working to save our marriage, to save our life together. You told me we were broke. You told me we needed the money. You manipulated me into destroying my health so you could cheat on me without feeling guilty about spending the money. You didn't manipulate me, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. You chose to get that second job. Because you lied about our financial situation. Because you made me believe we were going to lose everything if I didn't. I grabbed the stack of credit card statements and threw them at him. They scattered across the floor between us, like evidence at a crime scene. $43,000, Derek. While I was working 2 jobs and eating ramen, you spent $43,000 on designer clothes and expensive dinners and weekend trips and jewelry for another woman. How do you justify that? How do you make that okay in your mind? He didn't answer, just stood there, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal, looking for the first time like he might actually understand the magnitude of what he'd done. Do you love her? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded for that question. Derek looked up at me, and for just a second, I saw something honest in his expression. I don't know. Maybe. I think so. The pain of that admission was somehow worse than everything else. All the lies, all the money, all the betrayal, somehow him loving her made it all unbearable. Then why are you still here? I asked. Why didn't you just leave? Why did you need to stay married to me while building a life with her? And there it was. The real question, the one that made everything else make sense. Derek's expression changed again, and this time what I saw was shame, real, genuine shame, because he knew exactly why he stayed, because I couldn't afford both, he said quietly. The truth hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. You stayed married to me because you needed my income, I said, and it wasn't a question. You needed me working those 80 hours a week to fund your relationship with her. You needed my sacrifice to pay for her luxury. That's why you didn't leave, not because you loved me or because you wanted to work on our marriage, because you needed.
Taylor, that's not fair. Fair? I laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? I gave you everything, Derek. I worked myself sick for you. I trusted you completely. I believed every word you said about us struggling together, about getting through hard times as a team. And you used that trust, that love, that sacrifice. You used all of it to fund an affair. You used me, you exploited me, and you stood there and watched me destroy myself. And you didn't care as long as the money kept coming in. I did care, Derek said, and now there were tears in his eyes. I do care about you, Taylor. This wasn't about not caring. It was just, things got complicated. No, I said firmly. Things didn't get complicated. You made a choice. You chose to lie. You chose to cheat. You chose to steal. You chose to watch me suffer and do nothing to stop it, because my suffering benefited you. That wasn't complicated. That was calculated. I walked around the table, moving closer to him, and he actually took a step back. I want you out, I said. Pack your things and get out of my apartment. Our apartment, Derek corrected automatically. Both our names are on the lease. Fine, our apartment. But I'm the one who's been paying the rent for the past 6 months while you spent money on your girlfriend. So I'm the one staying. You're leaving today. Taylor, can we please just talk about this? Can we try to work something out? I know I messed up, but we've been together for 6 years. That has to count for something. It did count for something, I said. It counted enough that I worked 80 hours a week to keep us afloat. It counted enough that I sacrificed my health and my happiness for our future. But apparently it didn't count enough for you to be faithful. It didn't count enough for you to be honest. It didn't count enough for you to stop exploiting me. I pulled out my phone and showed him a document I drafted that morning with Brianna's help. This is a financial accounting of every dollar you've spent on Simone over the past 18 months. $43,000 in credit card debt, plus approximately $28,000 from our joint account. That's money I earned, by the way, since your commission barely covered your own personal expenses. $71,000 total. That's what this affair cost. That's what you stole from me. Derek's face went even paler as he scanned the document. My attorney will be filing for divorce on Monday, and I'll be requesting full reimbursement of the money you spent on Simone, plus compensation for the emotional distress you caused by your financial fraud. I'll also be requesting that you assume all responsibility for the debt you incurred during the affair. You can't do that, Derek said, but he sounded uncertain. We're married. That debt is joint. Actually, since you opened those accounts without my knowledge and used them for personal expenses unrelated to our marriage, my attorney thinks we have a very strong case for proving they're your sole responsibility, especially with all the evidence I've compiled. I have emails showing you deliberately hid these accounts from me. I have your own words saying you spent this money on another woman. I have proof that you manipulated me into working more hours by lying about our financial situation. Any judge is going to see this for what it is, fraud. Derek looked genuinely scared now. Good. Pack your things, I repeated. You have until noon. After that, I'm changing the locks and filing a police report for financial fraud. A police report? Taylor, you can't be serious. Try me. I met his eyes, and I made sure he saw that I meant every word. You stole from me, Derek. You committed fraud. You exploited me. I'm done being the understanding wife. I'm done making excuses for you. You face consequences now, or I make sure everyone knows exactly what you've done. Your family, your friends, your employer, everyone. We stood there in our kitchen, the space where we'd shared so many meals and conversations and moments of what I'd thought was genuine partnership. But it had all been a lie. Every smile, every "I love you," every "we're in this together," all lies designed to keep me working, keep me sacrificing, keep me funding his double life. I'll pack, Derek said finally, his voice hollow. He turned toward our bedroom, but I stopped him with one more question. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually love me? Or was I always just a paycheck to you? Derek looked back at me, and for just a second I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the man who'd proposed under the stars, the man who'd promised to love me forever. But that man was gone, if he ever really existed at all. I don't know, he said finally. I honestly don't know anymore. And it was the first completely honest thing he'd said all morning. And somehow, that made it hurt even worse. Derek was gone by 11:30 a.m. I stood at the window of our apartment and watched him load his belongings into his car. The car I'd helped him buy 3 years ago, back when we were still a real couple with real dreams. He made 3 trips up and down the stairs, and each time I expected to feel something. Relief, maybe? Or sadness? Or even anger? But I felt nothing, just a bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond the physical toll of my 80-hour work weeks. This was the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, the kind that came from investing your entire self in something that turned out to be built on lies. When his car finally pulled out of the parking lot, I called in sick to both of my jobs for the first time since I'd started working 2 jobs. My supervisor at the corporate office, Monica, was immediately concerned. Taylor, you never call in sick. Are you okay? Do you need to go to the doctor? I need time, I said, and my voice sounded strange even to myself, flat, mechanical. I just found out my husband has been cheating on me and stealing money. I kicked him out this morning. I need a few days. There was a pause, and then Monica's voice came back, softer and filled with genuine care. Oh, honey, take all the time you need. Take the whole week if you have to. We'll manage without you. You take care of yourself. I called the retail store next, and Travis, the manager, was equally understanding. Family emergency. Got it. We'll cover your shifts. Come back.
Family emergency. That's what I'd called it. But the truth was, my family wasn't an emergency. My family was the emergency. The person who was supposed to be my partner, my teammate, my safe place to fall, had been the source of all my suffering. I lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling, and that's where Kennedy found me 2 hours later when she used the spare key I'd given her years ago. "I brought food," she said, setting several bags on the kitchen counter. "Real food, not ramen. When's the last time you ate an actual meal?" I had to think about it. Tuesday? Maybe Monday? Oh God, Taylor. Kennedy started unpacking containers. Soup from my favorite restaurant, fresh bread, a salad with grilled chicken, a chocolate dessert. "You're going to make yourself sick. Actually, you've probably already made yourself sick. Have you seen a doctor recently?" "Can't afford it," I said automatically, then laughed bitterly. Except I probably could have afforded it if my husband hadn't been spending all my money on his girlfriend. Kennedy brought me a bowl of soup and sat on the coffee table in front of me, making sure I ate before she said anything else. The soup was warm and rich, and I realized with shame that my body had forgotten what real food tasted like. "I called Natasha," Kennedy said once I'd eaten half the bowl. "She's the attorney Brianna recommended. She wants to meet with you tomorrow if you're up for it. She said based on what I told her, you have an excellent case for divorce with financial restitution." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means Derek is going to pay for what he did. Literally." Over the next few days, I slowly began to piece my life back together. Natasha, the divorce attorney, turned out to be a sharp woman in her 50s who'd built her career on cases involving financial fraud in marriage. She looked over all the evidence I'd compiled with Brianna's help and smiled grimly. "This is one of the most documented cases of financial infidelity I've ever seen," she said. "He kept receipts. He left a trail. Some people are smart enough to hide their affairs. Your husband was arrogant enough to think you'd never find out." "Can I actually make him pay back the money?" I asked. "Or am I going to be stuck with half his debt?" North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means marital property and debt are divided fairly, not necessarily equally. But this debt wasn't incurred for marital purposes. It was incurred for personal gratification during an extramarital affair. We're going to argue that it's entirely his responsibility. And the money from our joint account that he spent? That's theft, plain and simple. You earned that money, and he spent it on someone else without your knowledge or consent. We're going to request full reimbursement, plus damages for emotional distress. Can we actually win this? Natasha looked me directly in the eyes. "Taylor, I've been practicing family law for 27 years. I've seen a lot of cases. This is the most clear-cut case of financial exploitation I've ever encountered. Yes, I think we can win. But I need to prepare you for something." "What?" "It's going to get ugly. Derek is going to fight this. He's going to claim you're being vindictive, that you're exaggerating, that he has just as much right to that money as you do. He's going to try to make you look unreasonable. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the past 6 months, about working until my body gave out, about eating ramen while he ate steak, about crying in my car while he laughed with Simone, about sacrificing everything while he sacrificed nothing. Let him try. I have the receipts, I have the evidence, I have the truth. Let him try to make me look unreasonable. Natasha smiled. Good. That's the energy we need. The legal process began moving forward. Natasha filed for divorce and included a detailed accounting of Derek's financial fraud. She requested that he assume all debt from his secret credit cards, reimburse me for the money he'd spent from our joint account, pay spousal support during the divorce proceedings since I'd been the primary earner, and cover my legal fees. Derek's response came a week later, and it was exactly as Natasha had predicted.
His attorney claimed I was being vindictive and unreasonable, that the money was marital property and he had every right to spend it, that my request for reimbursement was absurd and without merit. Reading his response made me so angry I shook. Even now, even with all the evidence, he was trying to play the victim. He was trying to make it seem like I was the problem for expecting him to face consequences for his actions. But something had changed in me during those days after I kicked him out. I wasn't the exhausted, manipulated woman who'd worked herself to death believing his lies. I was someone who'd seen the worst of human betrayal and decided to fight back. I quit the retail job. It was a hard decision. I needed the money for legal fees and to rebuild my savings, but I also needed my health, my sanity, my life back. I couldn't keep destroying myself, even in the name of justice. My supervisor at the corporate job, Monica, called me into her office the day I came back to work. "I heard what happened," she said gently. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. But I want you to know that we value you here, Taylor. You're one of our best employees, and I've been impressed by your dedication these past months." "Thank you," I said, exhausted from just 8 hours at one job after months of working 16. "I also want to offer you a promotion. We've been looking for a senior marketing manager, and you're our top choice. It comes with a 30% salary increase and better benefits. You'll be able to work from home 2 days a week. I know this might not be the right time, but I wanted you to know the position is yours if you want it." "I want it? God, yes, I want it." Monica smiled. "Good. You deserve it. You've always deserved it. I'm just sorry it took us so long to offer."
The irony wasn't lost on me. While I'd been working 2 jobs to fund Derek's affair, I'd had the potential for a promotion and raise at my corporate job all along. If I'd just focused on advancing at one job instead of splitting myself between 2, I would have been in a better position financially. But Derek had manipulated me into thinking the second job was our only option. One more way he'd stolen from me. Not just money, but opportunity. Over the next few weeks, I slowly started taking care of myself again. I went to the doctor for a full checkup and learned that I'd been pushing my body so hard that I'd developed high blood pressure, chronic fatigue, and was borderline anemic. The doctor prescribed medication and supplements, but she was firm about the real prescription: rest, proper nutrition, and stress reduction. "Your body has been in crisis mode for months," she explained. "You can't keep running on empty. You need to give yourself time to recover." I started therapy with Brianna, Kennedy's girlfriend, who specialized in trauma and abuse. I'd been resistant at first to calling what Derek did abuse, but Brianna helped me understand that financial abuse was real and serious. "He manipulated your finances to control you," she explained during one session. "He lied to you about your economic situation to make you more dependent and more willing to work yourself to exhaustion. He exploited your love and your willingness to sacrifice. That's textbook financial abuse, Taylor. It's not dramatic to call it what it is." Slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. Not just my finances or my health, but my sense of self. The person who'd believed Derek's lies and worked herself sick, that person was gone. In her place was someone harder, wiser, less trusting, but also stronger. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my months of 80-hour work weeks. I started saying yes to social invitations instead of always being too tired. I bought myself new shoes, good ones, comfortable ones, and didn't feel guilty about the expense. I went to a nice restaurant and ordered whatever I wanted without checking the prices first. These small acts of self-care felt revolutionary after months of self-denial. My brother LaShawn came to visit from Atlanta, and we spent a weekend just being together. He'd always liked Derek, and learning the truth had made him furious. "I want to drive to wherever he's staying and beat his ass," LaShawn said over dinner one night. "What he did to you is unforgivable." "It is," I agreed, "but beating him up won't give me back the money or the time or the health I lost. The best revenge is making sure he faces legal consequences and building a life he can't touch. LaShawn studied me for a moment. "You've changed," he said. "You're different than you were before." "I had to be," I said simply. "The person I was before trusted too easily. She sacrificed too much. She didn't know her own worth. I can't be her anymore." "I like who you are now," LaShawn said. "She's a fighter." And he was right. I was a fighter now. Not by choice, but by necessity. Derek had taken so much from me, but he also revealed something I didn't know was there, a core of steel that refused to be broken no matter how hard things got. The divorce proceedings moved forward. Derek tried every tactic his lawyer could think of to avoid responsibility. He claimed the affair had ended. He claimed Simone had manipulated him. He claimed he was sorry and wanted to work things out. He tried to paint himself as a victim of circumstance who'd made mistakes but didn't deserve to be financially destroyed. But Natasha was relentless. She presented every receipt, every email, every text message. She showed the judge the timeline of me working 2 jobs while Derek spent freely. She documented every lie he told me about our finances. She proved that his spending was deliberate, sustained, and hidden from me through fraud. And slowly, the tide turned in my favor. The judge ordered a temporary support payment while the divorce was pending. Derek had to pay me $1,500 a month, not nearly enough to cover what he'd stolen, but enough to help me rebuild my savings while the legal process continued. Receiving that first payment felt surreal. After months of working myself to death while he spent freely, now he was being forced to support me while I healed. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a start. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, Natasha called me with news that made my stomach drop all over again. "Taylor, I need you to come to my office, today if possible. There's been a development." I arrived an hour later, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Derek hidden more money? Had he found a way to discharge the debt? Had he convinced the judge I was lying? What I found was somehow worse. Natasha had Brianna with her, both women looking grim. On the contents table between them was a stack of documents that made the original evidence look small by comparison. "What is this?" I asked, sinking into a chair. "Simone," Brianna said simply. "We subpoenaed her financial records as part of the divorce case, and, Taylor, she wasn't the only one." The room seemed to tilt. "What do you mean she wasn't the only one?" Natasha slid a document across the table. "Derek has had multiple affairs over the past 3 years, at least 3 that we can document through financial records. Simone is just the most recent and most expensive." I stared at the paper, not quite believing what I was seeing. Names, dates, amounts. An affair with someone named Ashley 2 years ago, another with someone named Lauren before that. Each one documented through the same pattern: expensive dinners, gifts, hotel rooms. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How much total?" Brianna pulled out a spreadsheet. "Based on what we can prove through financial records, approximately $97,000 over 3 years. $97,000. Nearly $100,000 spent on affairs while I worked myself to death thinking we were struggling to survive." "The Ashley affair is particularly significant," Natasha said, pointing to a section of the timeline. "It overlaps with when you were first talking about getting a second job. Derek told you that you needed to work more because of inflation, but inflation hadn't hit yet, not the way it did later. He was already spending recklessly on affairs, and he used the general economic anxiety to manipulate you into working more to cover his spending." The timeline was devastating. Derek had been cheating on me for 3 years. 3 years of lies and betrayal. The inflation crisis had just been his most recent excuse, the justification that made his manipulation even more effective. There's more, Brianna said, her voice gentle but firm. We found evidence that Derek took out a personal loan 18 months ago, $15,000. He told the bank it was for home improvements. Do you remember any home improvements? I shook my head numbly. The money went to Simone. He used it to cover the security deposit and first month's rent on her luxury apartment, plus furniture. I felt physically sick. So the debt is even worse than we thought? The good news, Natasha said, is that this strengthens our case significantly. We can show a pattern of financial fraud and manipulation spanning years. We can prove that he systematically lied to you about your financial situation to manipulate you into working more while he spent freely. This isn't just an affair, it's sustained financial exploitation. What does that mean for the divorce? It means we're not just asking for reimbursement anymore, Natasha said, and there was steel in her voice. We're asking for punitive damages. We're asking the judge to send a message that this kind of sustained financial fraud in a marriage is unacceptable. We want him to pay you back every dollar he stole, plus additional compensation for the emotional and physical harm his actions caused. I should have felt victorious, or at least vindicated, but all I felt was tired of discovering new betrayals, new lies, new ways Derek had exploited me. There's one more thing, Brianna said hesitantly, and I want to prepare you for this because it's going to be hard to hear. What could possibly be harder than what you've already told me? She slid one more document across the table, a bank statement, Derek's personal bank account, one I didn't even know existed. He's been taking money from your joint account and transferring it to this personal account for years, small amounts, usually under $200 at a time, so you wouldn't notice. But it adds up. He's got $42,000 in this secret account. 42,000? I couldn't even finish the sentence. That was money I'd earned, money I'd sacrificed for, money I'd worked myself sick to contribute to our supposedly struggling household, and he'd been siphoning it off the whole time. We're going to get it back, all of it. He can't hide assets during a divorce. And now that we know about this account, we're going to make sure every penny goes back to you. I sat there in Natasha's office, surrounded by evidence of 3 years of systematic betrayal, and something inside me finally broke. Not broke as in shattered, broke as in broke free. All the guilt I'd been carrying, all the questions about whether I could have been a better wife or done something differently, it all fell away. This wasn't my fault. This was never my fault. Derek didn't cheat because I was inadequate or because our marriage was troubled. He cheated because he wanted to. He stole because he could. He manipulated me because I trusted him. And he'd gotten away with it for 3 years because he'd underestimated how thoroughly I'd fight back once I'd discovered the truth. Let's destroy him, I said quietly, looking up at Natasha and Brianna. Let's make sure every person in his life knows exactly what he did. Let's make sure he faces every possible consequence. Let's make him an example. Natasha smiled grimly. Now you're talking my language. Over the next few weeks, the legal battle intensified. Derek's attorney tried to argue that the secret bank account was for emergencies and that the money was joint marital property. Natasha countered with evidence that every deposit into that account had been made without my knowledge and that Derek had actively hidden the account from me for years. The judge was not amused. "Mr. Brooks," she said during one hearing, her voice sharp with disapproval, "you systematically deceived your wife about your financial situation while enriching yourself and your extramarital partners. You manipulated her into working excessive hours under false pretenses. You committed fraud against your spouse of 6 years. This court takes a very dim view of such conduct." Derek's face went pale. His attorney tried to argue that the judge was being prejudiced, but she shut him down immediately.
This isn't prejudice, counselor. This is reaction to documented evidence of financial fraud. Your client has provided extensive proof of his own misconduct through his spending habits and communications. I suggest you counsel him to settle this matter fairly rather than forcing this court to impose a judgment that will be far less favorable.
Derek tried to make eye contact with me across the courtroom, but I looked away. I was done seeing him as the man I'd married. Now I saw him for what he was, a con artist who'd run a 3-year scam on his own wife. The settlement negotiations began in earnest. Derek's attorney recommended he accept Natasha's terms: full reimbursement of all money stolen, $97,000 plus the $42,000 in the secret account, responsibility for all debt incurred during the affairs, spousal support for 2 years, and coverage of my legal fees. Derek refused. He actually refused. He tried to argue that $50,000 in reimbursement was more than fair and that he shouldn't have to pay spousal support since I had a good job. So Natasha filed a motion for the judge to decide. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, and those 3 weeks were some of the longest of my life. I had to prepare to testify about the most humiliating details of my marriage. I had to relive every moment of exhaustion, every lie, every betrayal. But I also had to prepare to fight for myself in a way I'd never fought before. The night before the hearing, Kennedy came over with wine and takeout. "How are you feeling?" she asked, studying my face carefully. Honestly, terrified. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if she thinks I'm exaggerating? What if Derek's lawyer makes me look bad? "Taylor, you have receipts, literal receipts. You have bank statements and emails and text messages. You have proof of everything you're claiming. The judge can't not believe you. The evidence is overwhelming." "But what if—" "No," Kennedy said firmly. "No what ifs. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that courtroom and you're going to tell the truth. You're going to show that judge exactly what Derek did to you, and you're going to win. Because you deserve to win. Because you're right. Because justice is on your side." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. "And if I don't win?" I asked quietly. "Then we appeal. Then we fight harder. Then we make so much noise that everyone knows what Derek did. But Taylor, I don't think you're going to lose. I think tomorrow is going to be the day you finally get justice." That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every moment of the past year, the exhaustion, the lies, the betrayal. But I also replayed the moments after, the strength I'd found, the support I'd received, the person I'd become. Win or lose tomorrow, I was not the same woman Derek had manipulated into working 80 hours a week. I was someone who'd discovered her own worth through the worst betrayal imaginable. I was someone who'd learned to fight back. And I was ready to show the world exactly what that fight looked like. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more intimate. It felt wrong that something so devastating, so life-changing, should take place in such an ordinary room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Natasha, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Derek sat with his attorney, refusing to look in my direction. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him. Good. Let him feel even a fraction of the stress he'd put me through. Judge Richardson entered, and we all stood. She was a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Be seated," she said, arranging papers on her desk. "This is the Brooks divorce case. I reviewed the motions and evidence submitted by both parties. Mrs. Brooks, you're seeking full reimbursement of funds your husband spent during multiple extracurricular affairs, assignment of all debt incurred during said affairs, spousal support for 2 years, and coverage of your legal fees. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Natasha said, standing. "And Mr. Brooks, you're contesting these requests and arguing that any debt and spending were joint marital decisions, correct?" Derek's attorney stood.
Yes, Your Honor. We believe Mrs. Brooks's requests are punitive and excessive, given that this was a joint marriage with joint finances. Judge Richardson looked unimpressed. I'll hear testimony. Mrs. Brooks, you may call your first witness. The plaintiff calls Taylor Brooks to the stand, Your Honor. My legs felt weak as I walked to the witness stand, but I kept my head high. I'd been through worse than this. I'd survived Derek's betrayal. I could survive telling the truth about it. After I was sworn in, Natasha began her questions. Mrs. Brooks, can you describe your financial situation before your husband began his affairs? I took a deep breath. We were comfortable. We both worked, we paid our bills on time, we had savings. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. And when did that change? About 3 years ago, Derek started saying we needed to be more careful with money. He said his commissions were down, that the economy was uncertain. He suggested we cut back on expenses. Did you cut back? Yes, significantly. We stopped eating out, stopped buying anything non-essential. I started shopping at discount stores, using coupons, calculating every purchase. But the financial situation continued to deteriorate, right? Yes. Derek kept saying things were getting worse, that we were barely keeping our heads above water. About a year and a half ago, when inflation really hit, he suggested I get a second job. And did you? Yes. I got a second job working retail. I worked from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. most days, 16, 17-hour days. I worked every weekend. I had one day off every 2 weeks. Why did you agree to this schedule? Because I thought we needed the money, because Derek told me we were barely surviving, because I loved my husband and I wanted to do whatever it took to keep us afloat. Natasha pulled out a document. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit A, Mrs. Brooks's work schedules and pay stubs from both jobs during this period. The judge examined the documents, her expression growing grimmer with each page. Mrs. Brooks, during this time when you were working 80-plus hours per week, what was your husband doing? He said he was working. He said he was trying to get more commissions, trying to bring in more money. He'd work late, he said. He'd meet with clients on weekends. But he wasn't actually working, was he? No. I looked directly at Derek for the first time. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him. Good. Let him feel even a fraction of the stress he'd put.
Your Honor, Natasha said, I'd like to submit Exhibits B through H, credit card statements, bank records, receipts, and communications documenting Mr. Brooks's spending on extramarital affairs. The next 30 minutes were excruciating as Natasha walked through each piece of evidence, every receipt, every hotel charge, every gift. The judge's expression grew colder with each exhibit. Mrs. Brooks, did you know about any of this spending? No, I didn't even know the credit cards existed. Derek hid all of it from me. Why do you think he hid it? Because he knew I wouldn't have worked myself to death if I'd known he was spending the money on affairs. He needed me to believe we were struggling, so I'd keep bringing in more income for him to spend. Derek's attorney objected. Speculation, Your Honor. I'll allow it, Judge Richardson said. Continue. Mrs. Brooks, can you describe the physical and emotional toll this situation took on you? This was the hardest part, admitting just how much Derek's manipulation had broken me. I was exhausted all the time, I said, my voice quiet. I'd cry in my car between jobs because I was too tired to drive home. I lost over 20 pounds because I didn't have time to eat proper meals. I developed high blood pressure and anemia. I had panic attacks when I thought about money. I was so tired I'd fall asleep in meetings at work. I had no life outside of working and sleeping. And how did your husband respond to your exhaustion? He thanked me. He told me I was amazing. He told me we'd get through it together because of my sacrifice. I felt tears burning in my eyes, but refused to let them fall. I watched me destroy myself and did nothing to stop it, because my suffering benefited him. Your Honor, Natasha said, I'd like to submit Exhibit I, medical records documenting Mrs. Brooks's health issues during this period. all of which her doctor attributed to overwork and stress. Derek's attorney stood. "Your Honor, may I cross-examine?" "Proceed." The attorney approached the stand and I braced myself. Natasha had warned me this would be the hardest part. They'd try to make me look vindictive or unreasonable. "Mrs. Brooks, you've painted quite a picture of victimhood here. But isn't it true that you chose to take that second job, that no one forced you?" "I chose it based on lies my husband told me about our financial situation." "But you made the choice. You're an intelligent woman with a corporate job. Surely you could have examined your finances yourself." "I trusted my husband," I said firmly. "We'd been married for 6 years. We'd always been honest about money. I had no reason to doubt him." "Until you did doubt him, and then you went through his private emails and financial records without his permission. After I found evidence of his spending, yes, I investigated further. Some might call that an invasion of privacy. Some might call stealing $97,000 from your wife financial abuse," I shot back. The attorney's expression hardened. "Mrs. Brooks, isn't it true that you're angry about the affairs and you're using these financial claims as punishment?" "No, I'm using these financial claims because they're true, because I have receipts, because every dollar I'm asking for is a dollar I earned that he stole." The cross-examination continued for another 20 minutes, but I held my ground. Every trick question, every attempt to make me seem unreasonable or vengeful, I answered honestly and firmly. This wasn't about punishment. This was about justice. Finally, the attorney sat down, and Natasha stood for redirect. "Mrs. Brooks, one final question. If you had known the truth about where your money was going, would you have worked those 80-hour weeks?" "Absolutely not. I would have divorced him immediately and kept every dollar I earned for myself." "Thank you. No further questions." The judge called for a short recess and I stepped down from the stand, feeling wrung out, but also strangely triumphant. I told my story. I told the truth. Now it was in the judge's hands. During the recess, Derek's attorney tried to approach me. "Mrs. Brooks, my client is willing to discuss a settlement. Perhaps we could—" "No," I said firmly. "We're past settlements. Let the judge decide." When we reconvened, it was Derek's turn to testify. I watched him take the stand and watched him swear to tell the truth and felt nothing but contempt. His attorney led him through a carefully crafted narrative about how the affairs just happened, how he made mistakes, how he never meant to hurt me. He claimed the spending had been excessive, but not intentional fraud. He claims he'd always planned to tell me about the debt. It was all lies, and I could tell the judge knew it. Then Natasha stood for cross-examination, and I watched Derek's carefully constructed story fall apart. "Mr. Brooks, you testified that these affairs just happened, but you opened 4 secret credit cards over the course of 3 years. You created a hidden bank account. You systematically transferred money from your joint account without your wife's knowledge. Does that sound like something that just happened to you?" Derek fumbled for an answer. It was complicated." "Was it complicated when you took your mistress to Miami while your wife worked double shifts?" "I don't." "Was it complicated when you bought Simone a $40,000 car while your wife was eating ramen for every meal?" "You're twisting things." "Am I?" I held up a piece of paper. "This is a text message you sent to Simone 6 months ago. Would you read it for the court, please?" Derek's face went pale as he read the message I'd seen months ago. "The wife is working all the time now, so I finally have the cash flow to treat you the way you deserve. Can't wait to see you this weekend." The courtroom was silent. "The wife," Natasha repeated. "That's how you referred to Taylor. Not your wife, not my wife, the wife, like she was an obligation rather than a person. Is that accurate?" Derek didn't answer. "Mr. Brooks, did you or did you not systematically lie to your wife about your financial situation in order to manipulate her into working more hours so you'd have more money to spend on your affairs?" I don't think it was like that." "Then how was it, Mr. Brooks? Please enlighten us." But Derek couldn't.
He sat there, trapped by his own words, his own actions, his own documented lies, and I watched his carefully constructed defense crumble into nothing. When Natasha finished, Derek looked like a man who just realized he'd lost everything. Good. Judge Richardson called a 1-hour recess to review all the evidence and prepare her decision. Those 60 minutes felt like the longest of my life. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom with Kennedy and Natasha, unable to sit still, unable to stop replaying every moment of my testimony. "You did great in there," Kennedy said, squeezing my hand. "You were honest and clear, and you didn't let his lawyer shake you." "But what if it's not enough?" I asked. "What if the judge thinks I'm being unreasonable?" Natasha looked up from her notes. "Taylor, I've been in that judge's courtroom for 15 years. I know how she thinks, and I saw her face when she was reviewing those exhibits. She's going to rule in your favor. The only question is, how much?" When we were called back into the courtroom, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Derek sat at his table looking defeated, and for just a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the 80-hour work weeks, the exhaustion, the lies, the contempt in his voice when he called me the wife. The sympathy evaporated. Judge Richardson entered, and we all stood. When we sat again, she looked directly at Derek, and her expression was ice cold. I reviewed all the evidence presented today, and I must say, in my 23 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a clear-cut case of financial fraud and emotional abuse within a marriage. Derek's attorney started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "Mr. Brooks, you systematically deceived your wife about your financial situation for 3 years. You manipulated her into working excessive hours under false pretenses while you spent the money she earned on extramarital affairs. You opened secret credit cards, created hidden bank accounts, and conducted multiple simultaneous relationships, all funded by your wife's labor and sacrifice." The judge paused, letting her words sink in. "This court finds that Mrs. Brooks's requests are not only reasonable, but necessary to rectify the financial and emotional harm you have caused. Therefore, I am ruling in favor of Mrs. Brooks on all counts." I felt Kennedy grab my hand, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All counts. "Mr. Brooks, you are hereby ordered to reimburse Mrs. Brooks the sum of $139,000, the total of all funds you spent on affairs, plus the money hidden in your secret bank account. You will assume sole responsibility for all debt incurred during your extramarital affairs. You will pay Mrs. Brooks spousal support of $2,000 per month for 2 years. And you will be responsible for all legal fees associated with this divorce." Derek's face had gone from pale to gray. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am awarding Mrs. Brooks an additional $50,000 in punitive damages. This court will not tolerate the kind of systematic financial abuse documented in this case. You will serve as an example that such behavior has consequences." 50,000 in punitive damages? That meant Derek owed me a total of $189,000, plus all the debt, plus legal fees. "Your Honor," Derek's attorney said weakly, "my client doesn't have that kind of liquid capital available. This judgment will financially devastate him." Judge Richardson looked at Derek without sympathy. "Your client financially devastated his wife while living a life of luxury. He can sell his assets, liquidate his retirement accounts, take out loans. I don't particularly care how he raises the funds, but Mrs. Brooks will receive every penny she is owed." She turned to me, and her expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Brooks, this court recognizes the extraordinary harm you have suffered. No amount of money can restore the time you lost or fully compensate for the health issues you developed as a result of your husband's manipulation. But this judgment is intended to ensure that you can rebuild your life without the burden of his debt, and that he faces appropriate consequences for his actions." "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion.
Mr. Brooks will have 90 days to make his first payment of $20,000, with the remainder to be paid in installments over the next 2 years. If he fails to meet any payment, Mrs. Brooks may pursue additional legal remedies, including wage garnishment and seizure of assets. The judge banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. I sat there stunned as people began filing out of the courtroom. I'd won. Not just won, I'd completely been vindicated. The judge hadn't just ruled in my favor, she'd made it clear that what Derek did was wrong, was abuse, deserved punishment. Taylor? Natasha's voice broke through my daze. We need to talk about next steps. Make sure he can't hide assets before that first payment is due. But I barely heard her. All I could think was, it's over. The fight is over. I won. Kennedy pulled me into a hug, and that's when I finally let myself cry. Not tears of sadness, but of relief, of vindication, of justice finally served. "You did it," Kennedy whispered. "You fought back and you won." I pulled away, wiping my eyes, and looked across the courtroom. Derek was still sitting at his table, his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. His attorney was packing up papers with quick, angry movements, clearly frustrated by the loss. I felt nothing for Derek, not satisfaction at his pain, not residual love, not even anger anymore, just a vast, empty indifference. He was nothing to me now, just a man who'd made terrible choices and was finally facing consequences. As we left the courtroom, Derek's sister Sandra was waiting in the hallway. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Taylor, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. None of us knew what he was doing to you." "I know," I said, and I meant it. Derek's family had always been kind to me. They weren't responsible for his choices. What he did was unforgivable. Our whole family is disgusted. He won't be welcome at any family events until he makes this right, if he ever can. I just wanted you to know that we stand with you. That made me cry again. Derek hadn't just lost his marriage and his money, he'd lost his family's respect too. Outside the courthouse, Natasha outlined the next steps. We'd file the judgment with the county, set up the payment plan, monitor Derek's assets to make sure he couldn't hide anything. If he missed a payment, we'd take immediate action. "He's going to try to negotiate," Natasha warned. "He's going to claim he can't pay. He'll ask for reduced amounts or extended timelines. Do not agree to anything without consulting me first." "I won't," I promised. "I'm done being flexible for him. He pays what he owes, or I take everything he has." Kennedy drove me home, and we sat in her car outside my apartment for a long moment in silence. "How do you feel?" she finally asked. "Exhausted," I said honestly, "but also free? I don't know how to explain it. For so long, Derek had this power over me. Even after I found out about the affairs, even while we were fighting in court, he still had power. But now that's gone. The judge said what he did was wrong. The law is on my side. He has to face consequences, and I don't have to fight anymore." "You can finally move on," Kennedy said. "Yeah," I agreed. "I can finally move on." That night, I sat in my apartment now, not ours, and thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, I'd been working 80 hours a week, believing my husband's lies, sacrificing everything for what I thought was our future together. Now, I was free, vindicated, and about to receive almost $200,000 in restitution, money that Derek would have to work for the way I'd worked for it, money he'd have to sacrifice the way I sacrificed for him. The irony was sweet. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please, can we talk? I'm sorry, I'll make this right. I need you to understand." Derek. Still trying to manipulate me, still thinking his words meant anything. I blocked the number without responding. I was done listening to his lies, done considering his feelings, done giving him any space in my life at all. The next chapter of my life was starting, and Derek wasn't invited. The first payment arrived exactly 90 days after the judgment, deposited into my account via court-ordered wire transfer, $20,000. I stared at my bank balance, watching those numbers that represented Derek's first installment of consequences. It felt surreal. After all the months of working myself to death, all the ramen and exhaustion and tears, here was actual money. Money I didn't have to destroy myself to earn. Money that was owed to me. Justice in the form of a bank transfer. I bought myself groceries that day, real groceries, fresh vegetables, good meat, quality ingredients. I stood in the store without my phone calculator, without that constant anxiety about every dollar, and I put things in my cart simply because I wanted them. The checkout total was $143, and I didn't even flinch. Over the next few months, I focused on rebuilding my life. The promotion at work had made things financially stable even before Derek's payments started coming in, and now I could actually start saving again. Not the desperate, anxious saving of someone afraid they'll lose everything, but the calm, planned saving of someone building a real future. I started therapy 3 times a week with Brianna. We worked through the trauma of the financial abuse, the betrayal, the systematic manipulation. Some sessions were harder than others. There were days when I'd cry for the entire hour, grieving not just the marriage I'd lost, but the person I'd been before Derek broke my trust. You're not grieving who he was, you're grieving who you thought he was. The man you married never really existed. He was a performance Derek put on. You're mourning the loss of an illusion. That realization hurt, but it was also freeing. I didn't have to wonder what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently. There was nothing I could have done. Derek made his choices, and no amount of sacrifice or love or dedication from me would have changed them. I started dating casually, though I made it clear to anyone I went out with that I wasn't looking for anything serious. I needed to learn to trust again, and that was going to take time. One man, Daniel, seemed promising. He was a teacher, divorced himself with a teenage daughter. He understood complicated relationships and didn't pressure me for more than I could give. "Take your time," he said after our third date when I explained my situation. "I'm not going anywhere, and honestly, after what you've been through, you deserve to take all the time you need." That was new, dating someone who prioritized my healing over his own desires. 6 months after the judgment, Derek had made 3 payments, totaling $60,000. Natasha reported that he'd sold his car, taken out a loan against his retirement account, and picked up overtime at work to make the payments. Good. Let him work himself to exhaustion the way I had. Let him sacrifice the way I sacrificed for him. Let him finally understand what he'd put me through. "He's asking to meet with you," Natasha told me during one of our check-ins. "He says he wants to apologize in person." No, I don't need his apology. I don't need closure from him. I have closure from the judge's ruling. That's enough. "Are you sure? Some people find it healing to hear their abuser acknowledge what they did." Derek will never truly acknowledge what he did. He'll apologize for getting caught, for facing consequences, for losing access to my income, but he won't genuinely understand or regret the abuse itself, and I don't need to hear his performative apology to move forward. I was right. A week later, Natasha forwarded me an email Derek had sent to her, asking her to pass along to me. It was full of self-pitying nonsense about how hard his life was now, how he'd lost everything, how he hoped someday I could forgive him. Not once did he actually acknowledge the specific harm he'd caused. Not once did he say, "I was wrong to manipulate you," or "I'm sorry I exploited your sacrifice." It was all about his pain, his loss, his suffering. I deleted the email without. My support group had grown. I'd started meeting regularly with a circle of women who'd experienced similar betrayals, partners who'd stolen from them, manipulated them, exploited their labor. We called ourselves the Phoenix Collective because we'd all risen from the ashes of abusive relationships. "You're the inspiration for a lot of us," one woman told me after a meeting. Her name was Jennifer, and her husband had stolen her small business's funds to support a gambling addiction. Watching you fight back, watching you win in court, it gives us hope that justice is possible. It is possible, I assured her, but you have to document everything. You have to be willing to fight. And you have to stop protecting your abuser, even when every instinct tells you to not. That was the hardest lesson I'd learned, that love and loyalty had to work both ways. I'd spent years protecting Derek, making excuses for him, prioritizing our marriage over my own well-being, and he'd exploited that loyalty at every turn. Never again. In my next relationship, if there was a next relationship, I'd require reciprocity. I'd demand honesty. I'd insist on respect. And at the first sign of manipulation or exploitation, I'd walk away without looking back. 1 year after the judgment, I was offered another promotion, director of marketing, with a significant raise and the option to work remotely full-time if I wanted. I accepted immediately. The extra income meant I could finally do things I'd only dreamed about during those dark months of working 2 jobs. I booked a real vacation, 2 weeks in Costa Rica, staying at a beautiful resort. I hired a financial advisor to help me invest wisely. I started a college fund for my future nieces and nephews. And I donated $10,000 to a nonprofit that helped women escape financial abuse. "You don't have to do this," Kennedy said when I told her about the donation. "That's money you earned, money Derek owed you." Exactly. It's my money to do with as I choose, and I choose to help other women who are going through what I went through. I choose to turn my pain into purpose. Derek's payments continued arriving on schedule. He never missed one, probably because he knew I wouldn't hesitate to pursue wage garnishment if he did. Each payment felt like another pound of weight lifting off my shoulders. By month 18, he'd paid $120,000 of the $189,000 he owed. Just 6 more payments and I'd have every penny he'd stolen from me. "And then what?" Brianna asked during therapy. "How will you feel when the payments are done and you have no more connection to him at all?" I thought about it. "Free," I said finally. "Completely, totally free. No lingering anger, no desire for more revenge. No, the anger is gone. It burned itself out months ago. Now I just feel nothing. He's not important enough to hate anymore." That was true healing, Brianna told me, when your abuser becomes irrelevant, when they hold no space in your emotional life anymore, when you can think about what happened without it ruining your day. I'd reached that point. Derek was just a man who'd made terrible choices and faced consequences. He wasn't a villain in my story anymore. He wasn't anything. My story was about me now, about my resilience, my recovery, my rebuilt life. The past was behind me. The future was wide open. And for the first time in years, I was excited to see what came next. 2 years after finding those first receipts in Derek's pockets, I sat in a coffee shop meeting with a journalist from a major women's magazine. They'd heard my story through the nonprofit I'd been supporting and wanted to write an article about financial abuse in marriage. "What would you want other women to know?" the journalist asked, her recorder running between us. "Women who might be in a similar situation but don't realize it yet." I thought carefully before answering. I'd want them to know that financial manipulation is abuse, even if there's no physical violence. If your partner is lying to you about money, hiding spending, or pressuring you to work more while they spend freely, that's abuse. You don't have to accept it just because you love them or because you're married. What were the warning signs you missed? So many, I admitted. The secrecy around his phone, the vague explanations about where he was, the way our financial situation never improved no matter how much I worked, the way he'd make me feel guilty for questioning him.
But the biggest sign was how he benefited from my exhaustion. He wasn't trying to help me work less, he was encouraging me to work more. That's not what a partner does. The article came out 3 months later, and my story went unexpectedly viral. My inbox flooded with messages from women sharing their own experiences of financial abuse. Some were still in the situation, others had recently escaped. All of them needed to know they weren't alone. I started a blog, then a podcast, then a nonprofit foundation specifically focused on helping women document financial abuse and pursue legal justice. The Phoenix Fund, I called it, and it grew faster than I'd ever imagined. "You've turned your trauma into a movement," Kennedy said one evening over dinner. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if Derek hadn't betrayed you?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "I'd probably still be in that mediocre marriage, working my corporate job, never realizing my full potential. Derek's betrayal destroyed the life I thought I had, but it also freed me to build something better." "Do you forgive him?" I considered the question. I don't think forgiveness is relevant anymore. Forgiveness is for when someone who hurt you deserves your emotional energy. Derek doesn't. He's just a person who existed in my past, made terrible choices, and taught me valuable lessons about my own strength. I'm grateful for what I learned, even though the learning process was hell. The final payment from Derek arrived on schedule 2 years and 1 day after the judgment. The wire transfer notification popped up on my phone when I was recording a podcast episode about rebuilding after financial abuse. $189,000, plus all the debt he'd taken on, plus 2 years of spousal support, plus legal fees. Derek had paid for what he'd done, not just financially, but in every way that mattered. His family had essentially disowned him. His friends knew the truth. His reputation was destroyed. And I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he was still working overtime just to keep his head above water financially. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I'd paid off my student loans. I'd bought a condo in a neighborhood I loved. I built a career helping others. I found a community of survivors who inspired me daily. And I learned to trust again, carefully and slowly, with healthy boundaries firmly. Daniel and I had been dating for over a year now, and it was everything my marriage to Derek hadn't been: honest, reciprocal, respectful. He'd met my family. I'd met his daughter. We talked openly about money, about feelings, about our future. "I want to make sure I never make you feel the way your ex-husband did," Daniel had told me early in our relationship. "So if I ever do something that triggers those memories or makes you uncomfortable, I need you to tell me immediately. Your trust is a gift, and I'm going to treat it like the precious thing it is." That was the difference. Derek had exploited my trust. Daniel honored it. One afternoon, exactly 2 years and 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Derek at a grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen him since the courtroom. He looked older, tired. The arrogance that used to define him had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Taylor," he said, stopping his cart when he saw me. "Hi." "Derek." I kept my voice neutral, neither warm nor hostile. "You look good. Happy." "I am happy." He glanced at my cart, full of good food, wine, fresh flowers, the kind of cart that belonged to someone who was comfortable and secure. "I heard about your foundation, the Phoenix Fund. That's good. You're helping people." "I am." "I'm glad you're doing well. I know that sounds hollow coming from me, but I mean it." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse, not the performative kind he'd shown in his emails, but something deeper. "Have you learned anything from all this?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. Derek was quiet for a moment. "I learned that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like they're disposable and expect no repercussions.
that the person I was, the person who did those things to you, was someone I'm ashamed to have been. That's not what I asked. I asked if you learned anything. He met my eyes finally. I learned that I had someone who loved me completely, who would have done anything for me, who was loyal and dedicated and incredible, and I destroyed that through my own selfishness and cowardice. I learned that lesson too late, but I did learn it. I nodded slowly. Good. Maybe you won't make the same mistakes with the next person. There won't be a next person, Derek said quietly. I'm not fit for a relationship. Not until I've done a lot more work on myself. Maybe never. Maybe that's wise. We stood there for another moment, two people who used to share a life, now strangers in a grocery store aisle. I really am sorry, Taylor. I know you don't need to hear it, and I know it doesn't change anything, but I am genuinely, deeply sorry for what I did to you. I know, I said, and I did. I could see it in his face, hear it in his voice. But Derek, your sorry doesn't define my life anymore. What you did to me was terrible, but it doesn't own me. I've moved past it. I've built something beautiful from the ashes you left. So thank you for the apology, but I don't need it. I'm fine without it. I saw something like relief cross his face. He'd spent 2 years owing me money, owing me restitution, owing me justice, and now, finally, we were even. He owed me nothing more. I hope you find peace, Derek said. I already have, I replied. I hope you find it too. I walked away without looking back, finished my shopping, and drove home to the life I'd built, the life Derek had no part in, the life that was entirely, beautifully mine. That evening, I stood on my condo balcony watching the sunset, and I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, the woman who'd worked 80 hours a week believing her husband's lies, the woman who ate ramen while he ate steak, the woman who sacrificed everything for a partnership that only went one way. That woman was gone. She'd been transformed by betrayal, tested by injustice, and ultimately strengthened by her choice to fight back. In her place was someone new, someone who knew her worth, someone who refused to be exploited, someone who turned her trauma into purpose and her pain into a movement that was helping countless others. Derek tried to break me. Instead, he made me powerful, and that was the greatest revenge of all. Not his suffering, but my success. Not his consequences, but my transformation. Not his loss, but my absolute, undeniable victory. I pulled out my phone and sent a voice message to the Phoenix Fund community. Hey everyone, this is Taylor. I just want to remind you all of something important. If you're in the middle of your fight right now, if you're gathering evidence or dealing with lawyers or facing down your abuser in court, I want you to know that you're going to make it through. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. I know you're exhausted and scared and wondering if justice is even possible. But it is possible. You are strong enough. You deserve better. And the life waiting for you on the other side of this fight is worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. 2 years ago, I was eating ramen and working myself sick while my husband spent my money on affairs. Today, I'm standing in my own home, financially secure, mentally healthy, surrounded by people who love me, doing work that matters. Your transformation is coming. Your justice is coming. Your beautiful life is waiting for you. Keep fighting. Keep documenting. Keep believing in your own worth. You've got this, and we've all got you. I ended the recording and posted it to our community group. Within minutes, responses started flooding in, thank yous and heart emojis and stories of courage from women in various stages of their own journeys. This was my purpose now, not just surviving my own abuse, but helping others survive theirs. Not just winning my own justice, but making justice accessible to others. Derek thought I was just the wife, a paycheck, a convenience, someone to exploit without consequence. He was so wrong. I was Taylor Brooks, survivor, advocate, fighter, and the architect of my own remarkable life. And I was just getting started. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to thank you for listening, for bearing witness to what happened to me and what I did about it. But more than that, I want you to take something away. If you're working yourself to exhaustion while your partner lives comfortably, investigate. If your financial situation never improves no matter how much you sacrifice, question it. If you feel like you're carrying all the weight while someone else reaps all the benefits, that's not partnership. That's exploitation. You deserve better. You deserve honesty. You deserve reciprocity. You deserve a relationship where both people sacrifice equally, where both people build together, where both people honor each other's trust. And if you're not getting that, if you're being used, manipulated, lied to, you have the power to fight back. Document everything. Save every receipt, screenshot every conversation, build your case, find your people, and when you're ready, strike back with everything you've got. Justice is possible. Transformation is possible. A beautiful life after betrayal is not just possible, it's waiting for you to claim it. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps me continue telling these stories and supporting survivors through the Phoenix Fund. And if you're in the middle of your own fight right now, whether it's against financial abuse, infidelity, exploitation, or any other betrayal, drop a comment. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know what you need. This community is here for you. We're all phoenixes here. We've all risen from ashes. We've all turned our pain into power. And together, we're unstoppable. Thank you for being part of this journey. I'll see you in the next story. Stay strong, stay fierce, and remember, you're worth so much more than they ever